Thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Lakeisha, for sharing your stories. Tanya, you talk about fear, something that we can all relate to, but you didn't let it stop you. I love what you said about overcoming fear and having the courage to simply take the first step. And Lakeisha, plans are often delayed for many of us, just like you mentioned, but you persevered and you are supposed to be here, just like the other graduates that we are honoring today. Now I am pleased to introduce our commencement speaker, Juju Chang. Juju is an Emmy Award-winning co-anchor of ABC News Nightline and a regular contributor to Good Morning America and 2020. With the rise of hate crimes against the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, Juju leveraged her platform to become a much-admired champion of social change. She made U.S. broadcast history co-anchoring the 2021 ABC News live special, Stop the Hate, The Rise in Violence Against Asian Americans, alongside fellow Korean American co-anchor Eva Pilgrim, and a cast of Asian American and Pacific Islander journalists, thought leaders, lawmakers, and celebrities. Known for her in-depth personal narratives and long-form storytelling, Juju has won acclaim for stories with underlying themes of civil and women's rights and social justice topics. In addition to reporting, Juju has profiled newsmakers like Joe Biden, Oprah Winfrey, and Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg, along with entertainers such as Tom Hanks, Chris Pratt, and Nicki Minaj, and social media moguls Kendall Jenner and Dude Perfect. An ABC News veteran, Juju joined the network as an entry-level desk assistant in 1987 after graduating with honors from Stanford University. Prior to her roles at ABC, she was a producer for World News Tonight, a co-anchor on the overnight show World News Now, and news anchor for Good Morning America. Juju's work has been recognized with numerous awards, including multiple Emmys, Gracies, a DuPont, and Merwin Peabody Awards. Born in Seoul, South Korea, and raised in Northern California, Juju is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and a founding board member of the Korean American Community Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Juju Chang.
Hello, graduates. Hello. How you feeling? Yeah? Really? That's how you feeling? Night Owls, class of 2022. Woo! I heard that many of you brought as many as 6 family members. I call that rolling heavy, right? I know that so many of you have flown here from across the country to celebrate. So I want you to take a moment to look around. Wave if it's your family if you have to. Soak it all in, right? Woo! You earned this moment. You deserve this moment. And as you look up at the pendants up there, this is the home of the Arizona Cardinals, right? I don't know if you know this, but in a couple of weeks, Def Leppard and Motley Crue are going to be kind of where you are. And for the younger demo, The Weeknd and Doja Cat will be here in August. But for today, you are taking the stage. And this is where we celebrate a different kind of victory, one that involves as much guts and sacrifice and hard work as any victory in the NFL. This is a celebration of you. And I've come to understand that WGU is known as the University of You, which seems apt. I know that for most of you, it hasn't been a straight line from childhood to high school to college, right? Tanya and Lakeisha told us. You're here because you want to be here, not because somebody wanted it for you. I know that the average age of today's graduates is 37, and that means that for many of you, it's been a very long and winding road from high school to college. And in my mind, that makes today all the more impressive, all the more worth celebrating, as a true victory over whatever challenges you've overcome to be sitting here today, all spiffy, in your cap and gown, with your loved ones bursting with pride, looking on. I also know that for many of you, you are the first in your family to graduate from college. You are pioneers, bridge builders for your entire family. And that's not just your immediate family, that's for your nieces and your nephews. That's for your neighborhood kids, and of course for your own kids, who can now look at you and see that you did it, and maybe think they can do it too. Your victory gives them permission to dream. That's what role models do. That's what you're doing today. Today is a day to reflect back on how much you've accomplished, and also turn and look forward to your future. That's why it's called commencement. It's the beginning. It's the commencement of your next adventure, the first day of the rest of your lives. As you've heard, I've spent more than 30 years traveling around the world as a journalist, right? I'm now the co-anchor of ABC News Nightline. We're on after Jimmy Kimmel. It's very late. You can Google. But I look back and I can't believe the life adventures I've seen. I covered the earthquake in Haiti, the mass shootings at Sandy Hook and at Pulse in Florida, and of course, the COVID pandemic. And we've learned together so many lessons, right, about ourselves and our nation. We've learned that we're resilient, that we're full of ingenuity. We've learned to applaud healthcare heroes and essential workers. And yet, so many frontline workers were disproportionately disadvantaged. They were not essential workers because they chose to be frontline workers. Many were essential workers because they had no choice. They had to feed the family, or they had to pay rent, and they didn't have the generational wealth to fall back on. You feel me? We quickly started seeing those divides in our country. And I hope that we never, ever lose sight of the fact that people who lived in predominantly Black and brown communities were at times more likely, twice as more likely to die of COVID than those who did not. That divide between those who had the luxury of work from home and those who did not. Those who had the privilege of social distancing and those who did not, whose small apartments didn't allow social distancing when one in the family got COVID. There were those who had the luxury of distance learning, and those, as Tanya suggested, who didn't have the iPads and the Wi-Fis and the multiple rooms where you could distance learn easily or effectively. Let's not ever forget that divide, because once you see it, we shouldn't unsee it. And yet, one of the few positive discoveries we made during the pandemic is that when it's done right, when motivated students like yourselves, online learning works. Right? You guys are proof of that. WGU is a shining example of that, proving the naysayers that online learning is vital. It's a vital option for so many. It's what Scott, your president, told me as we were walking out here. Yeah, the pandemic amplified our diversity, right? It amplified your distinction. WGU has been a disruptor in the education space long before the pandemic, right? And it is poised to lead the way out of this era. In fact, this year, you're celebrating 25 years, that's why I'm wearing this cord, of breaking tradition. Now, I can only imagine how much time, how much sweat equity and money that you and your families have invested in getting you to this place. I also know that many of you did it while holding a job, or jobs, or raising kids, or caring for your parents, et cetera, which makes your investment all the more precious. So I want to take a moment and remind you of how much you stand to profit from your investment. The Bureau of Labor Statistics calculated that workers with a college degree over 40-year careers can boost earning potential by $1 million. That's a pretty good return on investment, or ROI, as they say in the business school. Who's here from the business school? Now take that earning potential and say you invest that into buying something like a home. That's the American dream, right? It's also the biggest financial asset that most families have. It is the foundation of generational wealth that is handed from one generation to the next. You guys are true pioneers. A report by First American found that homeowners are more likely to be college educated, and that gap only grew in the last 10 years, from 10% to 20% in 2017. So those are the financial benefits. But did you know that a college degree gives you physical benefits as well? The Lumina Foundation found that college degree holders demonstrate healthier habits. Who knew? Studies showed that the proportion of adults smoking dropped significantly, 20% of high school graduates versus 5% of bachelor's degree holders. Those of you fidgeting right now, I feel you, former smoker. The report also found a strong positive correlation between eating fruits and vegetables, exercising, wearing a seatbelt. Of course, it doesn't take a college degree to know buckling up is smart. And of course, I have 3 sons who don't like fruits and vegetables. And they're adults, so, you know. But it's all the more reason to push towards college. So according to the National Academy of Sciences, it actually will benefit your longevity and your prosperity. So those are the physical benefits, the financial benefits, but did you know there are psychological benefits as well? In 2016, Pew Research Center found that 60% of workers with a bachelor's degree believe their job gives them a sense of identity, right? Versus 40% who don't, without those college degrees. The psychosocial benefits, as those of you in the education department know, means that it boosts your self-esteem, right? Your kids, your employers, anyone who ever asks you in the future will know that they are dealing with a college graduate, a striver. And that feeling that you will get every time you look in the mirror and you know, that feeling is priceless. And yet, for the very same reason that you're sitting here, having run that gauntlet for the past 2 years, battled through, sacrificed, struggled, for that same reason, I'm going to give you one cautionary note. I'm a Jew by choice. I know I don't look Jewish. But my mother's Buddhist, and this comes from a Buddhist teaching. It actually comes from Jack Kornfield's book, Buddha's Little Instruction Book. When asked what the biggest mistake people make in their life, the Buddha replied, or at least Jack Kornfield replied, the biggest mistake we make in life is that we think we have time. Time is free, but it's priceless. You can own it. You can't own it, rather. You can't own time, but you can use it. You can't keep it, but you can spend it. And once it's lost, you can never get it back. Every one of you has chosen to invest your time, your most limited resource, to earn this degree. You've done that while working or parenting or caregiving or whatever, or just coping with the pandemic. But be sure that you're not headed towards sacrificing your family on the altar of your career. Just a reminder that it's just as vital to invest your time in your loved ones, in your family, in your chosen family, in your community. Remember that while that career can be a big part of your identity, it doesn't have to define you, and it certainly need not consume you. I will admit that at times, I let my career consume me. I'm the classic immigrant striver, right? I was born in Seoul, Korea. My family moved to California when I was 4. I thought, My family's food smelled funny. My parents talked funny. I was told my face looked funny, which is why I would sometimes go to sleep at night with Scotch tape on my nose, trying to grow a bigger nose, because they called me moon face. I wanted to be the classic California girl. I didn't want to be different. Who does? I watched my dad treated poorly, talked down to because he had a heavy accent or because he looked different. I didn't have the words then to describe that feeling of being marginalized, right? Today we might call it a microaggression or racism or unconscious bias. But what I knew back then, growing up, was that it didn't feel right. And for the past 30 years, I've spent my career seeing the world through the eyes of that young girl who knew what it's like to feel other. It's what drove me to Honduras recently to talk to families whose children were starving due to climate change, to see harvest after harvest crumbling in front of their eyes due to the heat and the drought. They'd invested their entire life savings on their teenage son and his chance of traveling with a coyote to cross the border to the United States so that he could maybe wash dishes or mow lawns to send money back to their desperate families. It's what draws me to stories of working class families in New Hampshire or Tennessee, where wages are stagnant, opioids are rampant, and despair is seemingly everywhere. I spent a week in a hospital in East Tennessee watching newborns in the NICU being detoxed from opioids. It is a travesty, and often you look around and you feel like despair is everywhere. So people often ask me, how do you push back despair? Covering stories over and over again like these. And I tell them two things. One is Anne Frank. Her diary. She was hiding from the Nazis, you remember? She was 13 years old before dying in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. But she wrote in her diary, in spite of everything, I still believe that people are good at heart. I simply can't build up my hope on a foundation of confusion, misery, and death. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet when I look up to the heavens, I think it will all come right, and that this cruelty will end, and that peace will return. I, like Anne, believe that people are really good at heart. I've covered, I told you, mass shootings more than I care to remember. And I remember specifically, I went to the Newtown shooting in Connecticut, the Pulse shooting in Orlando, and the Vegas shooting. That was the one, the Route 91 Harvest Festival, remember? And there was a shooter on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay. I remember talking to one victim in the hospital. She'd gone to the concert the night before with her parents. They were enjoying the music, and they suddenly heard gunfire. So they started to run and run and run until she realized, my pants are wet. And she looked down and realized, I'm bleeding. She'd been shot in the hip, and she'd run about a quarter of a mile with a bullet lodged in her hip. And then she collapsed, she told me. And in that moment, she told me, heroes emerged. A complete stranger who happened to be an off-duty firefighter shielded her and gave her medical aid. Others around her were using concert fencing as gurney and getting people to the hospital. I interviewed people at the hospital who told me they saw car after car after car lined up, shuttling people, strangers, wounded, to the hospital. And the woman I was interviewing in that hospital bed the next day said to me, you know what I saw? I saw one bad man in a tower and hundreds of heroes on the ground. So I, like she and Anne Frank, believe that people are essentially good and that we each have the power to lift each other up if we listen to our better angels. I think the best way to do that, okay, and this is going to sound corny, so bear with me, People often ask me, how do you engage in self-care when you deal with all this? And I turn towards meditation. It is not a magic wand. And to be clear, I am horrible at meditating. But I try, and I'll try to, you've seen all the studies about they work with veterans, they work with Wall Street people, they reduce anxiety, it helps you sleep, There's a type of meditation called loving kindness meditation. And the goal is to spread loving kindness. I told you it's cheesy. Bear with me. It's to spread loving kindness through your meditation. But do you know where you start? You start by sending loving kindness to yourself. Who is tougher on you than you? Who is your worst critic? Who is the meanest to you? Often, that's you. And so you have to start by giving yourself a break, by being kind to yourself. Stop beating yourself up. And that then allows you to turn that loving kindness towards others, towards your children, towards your partner, towards your colleagues. I want to end by making clear one last point. Everyone in this stadium, look around, is proud of your diploma. But as parenting experts constantly advise, it's unconditional love that wins out. Don't praise the prize, praise the effort, right? I am dazzled by the effort that it took for you to get here. But you were dazzling long before you got here. You are worthy. Congratulations, Night Owls, class of 2020-22. Thanks for having me.